Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at the market site in Times Square, we have Wasif Latif. He is the head of investments over at VictoryShares and Solutions. We're going to take a look at late cycle investment opportunities. Wasif, it's great to have you with us. And with such a strong 2019 just behind us, what's your outlook for the market and the economy going forward?
Yeah, it was a very strong year, 2019, one for the record books. This year started off also very strong. But what we're seeing is the run-up that we saw in 2019 was a lot to do with the prices going up, but not earnings going up as well. So markets have gotten more expensive since then. So going forward, earnings really have to show up, and that's a big question mark that's out there. Also, the geopolitical risks that are still out there. So there's a lot of questions. The trade war is still pending. So with that in mind, what we're trying to do in our portfolio is invest in stocks that exhibit lower volatility or minimum volatility to, while remaining in stocks, have a little bit of that downside protection as we're going through this.
What does an investment strategy look like if you're trying to make it more lower vol?
So basically, you look at the stock's price volatility over time and allocate more to stocks that have a lower volatility from that standpoint and not as much to ones that have a higher volatility. So it's basically trying to buy stocks that don't go down as much when the market goes down. And just trying to allocate accordingly. There are different types of strategies that investors can make based on that. They can be sometimes sector neutral, looking at just pure stocks that are lower in volatility. We apply a different type of an approach in our methodology that looks at some of the fundamentals as well.
What are some of the common pitfalls that you see when constructing a low volatility portfolio, and how do you manage that?
Sure. So some of the pitfalls are when you allocate just to minimum volatility of stocks, just looking at the pure volatility and just allocating accordingly, and not really keeping in mind any valuation, any quality of the stock, any profitability of the company. So what we do in our portfolio is we first start with a universe of stocks that says, let's just find a good set of companies. Companies that have good valuation, good profitability, good price momentum, and things of that nature. And then from that universe, we then find the stocks that have lower volatility or minimum volatility accordingly. When we do that, what it does is it creates a portfolio that's a little bit more forward-looking, and it really does well over time as well. As you know, in the long run, markets generally tend to go up. And so if you invest purely in low volatility, you're missing out on some of that upside. So what we do is we find good set of stocks that are going to do well anyway over time. But then within that, we find the ones that exhibit that lower volatility.
That has to be challenging in this environment, considering going into earnings season, that there is a big question around valuation because of the run that stocks have had, even up until the beginning of this week. But as an asset allocator, how would a low vol strategy fit into the overall portfolio?
Sure. So if it's a purely focused strategy that's only on lower volatility, then there's a timing issue because then it's only geared to do well when the markets go down. But the way we approach it is the strategy that we have is more evergreen. So with that type of a strategy, I can allocate to it within the US large cap space, for example, on a more longer term basis, or even as a core holding at times, because over time, that approach generally tends to do better than the market, but also has exhibiting the characteristics of having lower volatility when there is volatility in the market.
All right, thank you so much for joining us at MarketSite. And thank you for joining me on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.